today might be one that is familiar to most of you, maybe not. And my hope is that maybe you will hear some new things today, that we raise up some new visions or perk your imagination in a new way or raise up a new challenge in the hearing of it today. And this comes to us from the Message Bible, and it is Matthew chapter 14. It is the feeding of the 5,000. When Jesus got the news, he slipped away by a boat to an out-of-the-way place all by himself, but unsuccessfully. Someone saw him, and the word got around. Soon, a lot of people from the nearby villages walked around the lake to where he was. When he saw them coming, he was overcome with pity, and he healed their sick. Toward evening, the disciples approached him. "We're out in the country, and it's getting late. Dismiss the people so that they can go to the villages and get supper." But Jesus said, "There's no need to dismiss them. You give them supper." "All we have are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they said. And Jesus said, "Bring them to me." Then he had the people sit on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He lifted his face to heaven in prayer, blessed, broke, and gave the bread to the disciples. The disciples then gave the food to the congregation. They all ate their fill, and they gathered 12 baskets of leftovers. About 5,000 were fed, not counting the women and the children. Here ends the gospel. So, how familiar is this text to people? How well do you think you know it? Is this a favorite story that you have from the Bible? Yeah, maybe? No, not the favorite, most favorite? I remember growing up, it was one of my favorite because I was always amazed at how much there was and how Jesus did whatever he did to make the abundance of bread and fish, that there were so many things left over when there were so many hungry people. And whether we, get into how he did this miracle, the one thing that is certain is that this is really something that touched those gospel writers. This is one of the only stories, one of the very few stories in Scripture that is in all 4 Gospels. It really highlights this activity of what Jesus did. But my hope today is that in the hearing or the retelling of it, that I create a contrast and a way for us to think about it new, that maybe creates a little bit of challenge for us in what it means to be Jesus' followers, his disciples. So let's kind of get started here a little bit. As we gather in this lovely outside pavilion, where we sometimes have had picnics or parties, and summer winds down and we think about those things that people are enjoying, the fests, the festivals, the reunions, the picnics, the fairs, backyard barbecues. It's kind of a lavish time of abundance where we share rich food and drink, we have good and lively conversation and warm hospitality. And so this lesson that we have today comes in the midst of that to really help us explore how the Bible is full of miracle stories and how the miracle of God's ability to feed hungry folks, to make something out of a small feast out of seemingly nothing, and how food and faith show us just what kind of God holds our lives. So through this text's grandiose abundance and miracling, that we are familiar with, or maybe think we are, I don't want us to get by too quickly in what the story is saying to us. So I want to share this with you today, kind of as a contrast. See, in the face of the biblical message that we got today, of hospitality and compassion and abundance, our culture, our society screams otherwise. Daily, from sun up to sundown, we are just barraged with messages telling us that there is not enough. So we better grab our share quick so that somebody else doesn't get it ahead of us. And in the U.S., there's a widening gap between those who have money and power and those who don't. And here in Illinois, maybe other places in this Midwest, the middle class and most of our faith communities that it probably includes are feeling that gap, facing rising costs, job insecurities, and the constant specter of fear. It's hard to be compassionate and hospitable when you don't have much. It's difficult to be satisfied when you're struggling to keep up or get ahead. It's tough to feel blessed when your somethings feel like nothings. And so this gap, this fear and hunger and poverty that we hear about, it's not new. It's the food scarcity that we know today was rampant in the ancient world. And looking at Matthew's familiar text, we can develop a contrast then between what God wants us to see and what the world wants us to feel and see and think we know. We start out today in the gospel text, and it said, now after this, Jesus went away to a place by himself. When Jesus heard about this, what did Jesus heard about? This he heard about was his cousin John's beheading. At Herod's great feast, John's head was brought in on a platter. Now, Jesus heard about this and wanted to get away. But Matthew emphasizes this at the beginning of this story because it's like an episode from the lifestyle of the rich and shameless. And then Matthew takes us immediately to a scene portraying the poor and the sick, the tired and the huddled masses looking for relief. It's like Matthew switches the channels from the Real Housewives to the news reports of immigration children stranded at the border. And he's capturing these two contrasts to indicate just what kind of God Jesus represents. Just what kind of kingdom he is bringing to his people. Now, over the last few weeks, we've been hearing about parables that lead up into this story. And maybe you can see in this story of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish multiplying to feed the huge crowd. Maybe you can kind of draw that parallel with that possibly bumper crop of the good soil that yields 30-fold or 60-fold or 100-fold. Even though, as this parable reminds us, these parables remind us that those weeds will grow up and flourish in the rich soil of God's abundant love. The abundant harvest of those who receive the word and nurture it should never be in doubt. Now, we have a God of extravagant abundance, all in the face of the world's modus operandi of scarcity. This worldview of scarcity, I'm convinced, hinders our faith. I think when we act from the worldview of scarcity, it speaks volumes about our faith. So I want to kind of challenge our notion of what it is for us to be Christian and perhaps living in a Christian nation. I want you to think a little bit about some of the things we do. I grew up in some work that really said that our budgets are moral documents. So whether it be a household budget, a church budget, a nation's budget, or a state budget, that it speaks about where your heart is, what is really important. And so as we consider our own sense of budget, and I want to take us to the notion of kingdom budgets, nation budgets, state budgets. There's a book by a man named Thomas Piketty. It's called Capital. And he gives us a glimpse in that that I'd like to use today that really highlights what I think is going on in the gospel here and what Jesus is wanting us to see. Piketty talks about economies based on the market alone, and he says it'll always create a greater and greater inequality and more poor people. And they're only the countries that have contradicted this trend are the countries that have instituted policies, particularly to deal with it and circumvent it. That is, in particular, countries that have put higher taxes on the wealthy and higher supports for the poor. A country that illustrates this is Brazil. And Brazil, in its early days, when it became a democracy, put an increase on taxes on the wealthy and on benefits put more benefits for its poor. And in spite of a whole host of other problems that they had, they did this, and they found that the inequality went down and the income of the poor went up. Now conversely, we live here in the United States, a kingdom of great wealth, really. And for the last 30 years, we've been cutting taxes for the wealthy and cutting benefits for the poor. And the result is an increase of poverty and an increase in wealth inequity and inequality. And studies have found in the U.S. that food stamps have the greatest impact on stimulating economic growth, while cuts in taxes have the least. In other words, our present generation's long model of economic development doesn't work. It in fact increases inequality, not decreases it. And I think that is what is going on, despite how political it sounds, what is going on here in the gospel. And why Matthew is holding up these two feast ideas of contrast right at the beginning of his story. I believe it is key to the whole story today, perhaps even to the whole Bible. The most important understanding of this miracle of abundance is that you are able to taste the abundant blessings that God longs to share with you, no matter how much the world throws our way. Now I know it's easy to get caught up like the disciples in the pervasive sense of not enough, of scarcity, of meager resources. We want to quit, perhaps, to send the poor, the tired, the hungry people home, or shut them out, or have them pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. But Jesus, who knows that God's presence is rife with abundance and teeming with fruitfulness, tells his disciples to get over their callous self-concern and feed the people themselves. You do it, Jesus says to them and to us. And the incredulously disbelieving, somewhat apologetic disciples offered their not enough, it's really mine meal, and it became not just enough, it became more than enough. And I believe this is the miracle, is that it took the involvement, the participation of Jesus using his power through the actions of his disciples, his followers, to make a difference in the world. And I think Jesus in Matthew moves them, and hopefully all of us, in the meaning of discipleship and God's great abundance. Because when we realize that there is so much more in what we have and in what we do when we share it and give it away, so much more comes back to us as well. That we are a stronger people, a stronger group, a stronger even individual when we act in selflessness and giving. When we participate in God's abundant kingdom rather than the scarcity view of the world. I know that we churchgoers are as hungry for signs of God's presence as any of those crowds who came to Jesus. And food may not be scarce for many of us here. But I know that we all sometimes feel that we're at the end of our resources. Maybe some of us are. Maybe we're worn out and tired and don't feel we have anything left to give. I often feel that too, and Jesus was clearly feeling that himself at the beginning of our text. But as you saw what happened, he put his whole self in and received more back. And there was more than enough to go around. I think the temptation is to always protect what feels like our meager remaining resources. But Jesus shows us that it is usually self-defeating. Instead, we're to take what little we feel we have and bless it, give it to God and break it and give it away. And we'll find that we have far more left over than we even thought we started with. That's the abundant economy of God and the road to the fullness of life. So I share with you today some bread and fish, some loaves and fish. And I really want to encourage you to carry this with you this week, maybe this month, and think about the miracles that you see going on around you, or that you participate in as Jesus' disciple. Where do you take what seems like nothing and make it into something? Where do you offer someone compassion and you see life and friendship grow? Where do you offer someone a helping hand and then you help someone begin a new set of hope, a new learning, or a new way? Where do you offer someone the possibility to connect with you or your family or perhaps the congregation in ways that helps them find dignity or find new life in whatever activity is going on? When a church that struggles with where it's going and who it is and what resource it is has, but finds that when it gives them away, God's miracles are still happening. These are the ways and the things which I invite you to look for as you continue to ache for holiness and yearn for goodness and change in our world, even if you're dubious about miracles. I think this text today calls us to expand our imaginations and see the kingdom view rather than the world view. To see the theology of abundance rather than the theology of scarcity. And that everywhere we go and we participate and open our eyes and hearts in new ways and feel this presence of God and taste the abundance that God offers, our hearts will bend to feed the world, here and everywhere. And there will be more than enough. Amen.